2 and 4? Yes, okay.
Popping bodies.
I am ready. We are ready.
It's fancy setup in here.
Good morning. Welcome. You are watching KUHS The Stream. This is the Weekend Boost. I am Paul Lane, the author of The Caregiver's Handbook. And today we have a guest, Amber Stevens. I am so excited to have her. Thank you for joining us today. You notice I'm wearing a mask. We're wearing our masks today. A couple of reasons. One, we really want to set the example. As community representatives, I think it's important that we do set this example. We're in kind of close proximity today. Usually we don't wear masks. I had a little bit of a runny nose this morning, and it's the responsible thing to do. So I hope that doesn't bother you. I hope you can hear me. So, guys, before we get started, I always like to start the day by introducing some books from past guests. I'm kind of going on a limited list today because we've had so many guests, and I just want to make this as brief as we can because I have so many things I want to ask you about today. But first, I just want to introduce again Virginia Sanchez's book, Pleas and Petitions: Hispano Culture and Legislative Conflict in Territorial Colorado. I love this book because this is my family, this is my roots, this is my history. I have great-grandparents who lost 7,000 acres in southern Colorado, which was Mexico, and it was taken from them by the powers that be. And so I see how that's firsthand, and this is really a deep book, very interesting book. So please, keep that in mind. Also, Karina Carinosa, shaman, has been on the show 2 times. She wrote this book, Enlighten the Fuck Up. And we can say that on the radio here. But an empathic psychic healer's weird stories and tough lessons and resources. I'm not all the way through this book yet, but man, it's very interesting book, very good read. You can get this through carinosa.com, or her information is, again, if you would like to call the station, I can get that information to you. But a very, very interesting read. I'm the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story, and this is a chronological outline of my wife's illness and how I, not by choice, but I ended up taking care of my wife for almost 2 years, and I lost her to cancer. But this is the book I wrote. In the interest of time, I'm going to be very, very quick. I'm going to go through one more book, and this, of course, Dale Carnegie's never been on my show, but I have been through the Dale Carnegie course. I went back as a graduate assistant. How to Win Friends and Influence People, one of the most powerful and influential books of all time. This book was, I believe, first printed in 1937, has touched millions and millions of lives, and there's a movement that still is active today. But if you are having trouble with friends and family and want to try to find a better way to communicate, please consider this book. And with that, I'm going to introduce Food, Feelings, and Freedom, The End to Emotional Eating. I got to tell you, when I first met Amber and I got this title of this book, I'm like, man, that's me. I always look in the mirror and I say, why am I so fat? And as I went through the book, oh my gosh, there's so many things that hit home for me.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
So, before we start, welcome again to the show.
Thank you.
What inspired you to write this book?
Really, it was a combination of my own personal journey and working with clients. I work closely with clients on their health and their wellness, and with health, that's a very broad field. Mm-hmm. But for myself, I was a healthy person, mm-hmm. right? And I felt like I was eating right, I was exercising, and then all of a sudden I wasn't healthy. Mm. And I was healthy, or I was unhealthy in a very bad way, and I was going unconscious. Mm-hmm. So clearly something was wrong in my body. And I saw a ton of specialists and tried to find, what's going on with me. And we didn't have, a solid diagnosis with me, but they came up with vasovagal syncope, which is a fancy way to say that the vagus nerve overreacts and it causes fainting. So syncope is a word for fainting. And I had to take a look at my life at that point really closely and say, what is it that is happening to me? And here I was, feeling healthy, working out, looking good, feeling good, but clearly I wasn't. And that's when just this red alarm went off and this big word of stress just came flashing into my life. And I had to take a look at that and realized, wow, I am really overstressed and it's affecting me, and that vagus nerve is highly impacted by stress. And so when I started looking closer at it, I realized, my diet isn't actually that great. I'm actually an emotional eater. And I wanted to write the book because I think there's this kind of disconnection out there where emotional eaters are only people who binge eat. They're only people who maybe have a lot of weight that they need to lose. And really, I like to say, if you have emotions, you're an emotional eater. It's just a matter of, are you allowing that emotional eating to take control of your life, or are you balancing that out? And I wasn't. And so I found mindfulness. That was a big piece on managing my stress. And through the techniques that I outline in the book, I was able to, kind of rein in my emotions, sit with them, understand them, and be like, you know what, I'm okay, and I don't have to be so stressed out, and others don't have to either. And here's the solution. So I had to write this book to get it out there to try to help everyone with our emotional eating.
Now, you are a nutritionist.
I am a health coach, slightly different.
Okay.
Yeah. Very knowledgeable in nutrition, but not a licensed nutritionist per se. Yeah.
Okay. So I would just, my story, I'm the kind of guy that goes to the refrigerator 20 times a day. Why do I do that? Is that emotional, or am I looking for food? I don't even know why I do it.
That can be a lot of things, especially right now, as we're looking at being at home and isolating and not going out to restaurants near as much as we used to. Part of that's just convenience, right? It's right there. You don't have to get up and walk down the hall to a fridge at your work. You don't have to go drive someplace to get lunch or anything, right? It's just there. But that kind of behavior actually points closer to boredom. So boredom in itself isn't necessarily an emotion. There's other emotions that kind of drive behind boredom. But I like to think of boredom as emotion because it drives our behaviors, right? And so it could be a couple things. We're bored and we're just kind of like, I don't know what to do. It's 100 degrees outside. So I'll just open the fridge and see if there's something magical in there that can pass the time. Then there's the convenience factor. Like, it's just right in front of you. And then there's procrastination. So perhaps there's something you do want to do. Perhaps, especially being at home, you're kind of overwhelmed with how much stuff you want to do but have never gotten to. And you know that they're important, but you don't really want to do them anyway. And so going and looking in the fridge or going and opening a cupboard is an easy way to find something to procrastinate. And it's not even something that we're consciously aware of. A lot of this happens subconsciously in our limbic brain. This is our emotional center. And it drives these decisions automatically for us. So, it could be any of those reasons there, especially if you're not hungry. This might be a little side note, but I'll jump into this here, where it's really important to pay attention to your hunger cues. And this is part of mindful eating. So on mindful eating, we pay attention really to what our body is telling us. Not what external factors are doing, but what internal cues are talking to us. So if you find yourself standing in front of the refrigerator and just staring, that's a great time to tune in and say, am I even hungry? And if I'm not hungry, why am I here right now? What is this that I'm doing? That takes you out of that limbic brain, puts you into that thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, and allows that brain to say, oh, you're just bored. Why don't you go for a walk? Why don't you read a book? Any number of things that you can do in place of eating. But you gotta just give yourself a little bit of time to get to that thinking brain to do that.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, emotional eating is not a gender-specific condition. So men, we don't talk about men having emotional eating habits or problems, and yet I'm guilty. I know. Last night I got home. I had a great, exciting day, and I when I'm excited, I eat. When I'm happy, I eat. I don't just eat when I'm sad or depressed. And so it's really difficult for me. I was real aware about my show today, so I go to I go get a sandwich. I go, okay, half the sandwich. But it's so interesting because I never thought of this as a male issue. So it was a real eye opener. Looking at your book and realizing that, gee, this affects me.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that connected with you. I think mostly as a society, it's not as acceptable for men to embrace their emotions, to talk about their emotions. And so we don't really tie emotional eating to a male behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what goes in with that, cliche of the emotional eater, that it's the woman
Mm-hmm.
all the time. But I think it's more just that women are more open, especially amongst their friend groups, to talk about their emotions. And we make jokes about it, especially as women, where, oh, I'm just eating my feelings today, ha 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 ha. I do the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We laugh about it that way. Men don't really say that. They don't say, I'm eating my emotions. They say, I deserve this steak.
Yes, we do.
And I deserve the big steak because it's manly, right? But that's still, there's an
Guilty.
emotional drive behind there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that we don't, I guess we overlook that, or we don't consider that, I could probably get some better control of my weight if I were aware of this, And so having you on the show today was just so exciting to me, because I know so many friends and family who are emotional eaters. And I've been talking to a few friends and family, and I was talking to my sister on the way here, and I was telling her about, how excited I was to see you today because of emotional eating. And my sister has dealt with weight, issues her whole entire life, like most of us, most adults do. And so once we get a grasp on this, how do we get a grasp on this, on this emotional eating? What's really central to that?
Well, you buy my book.
Mm-hmm.
But I do outline in my book, the first kind of chapters are about the information behind this, right? But then in the middle, there's something called the foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And the foundations are really the things that, just generally speaking, whether you think you're an emotional eater, you think you're not, you just eat out of balance and you want to do better. Those foundations set the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're called that.
Mm-hmm.
They set the tone for what your health is going to look like when you get those things aligned. So those foundations are sleep, movement, which is exercise, and just moving your body, right? Just getting up off the couch, getting out from behind your desk, just moving your body. All that kind of movement counts. I have massage in there because it really impacts our parasympathetic nervous system.
Wow.
To bring down stress, right? Sleep is huge. Hydration is absolutely huge. Vitamin D and sunshine. And I love throwing nature in with walking and with movement. Nature, the trees, actually release chemicals that calm our nervous system. So just sitting, not even sitting, 12 minutes is all that's really needed to move your body out in nature, get that blood flowing, get the lymphatic flowing, and get those chemicals to impact our body. It doesn't take very long a day. So those are some of the foundations, and if you get those foundations right, it's way easier to make those healthy choices when we're facing those difficult moments and those difficult emotions. If you kind of think through your life, at the moments probably when you've been healthiest, those were probably times where you were happier and not quite as stressed and things were going pretty smoothly. It's when we get to the moments in the not so perfect day, right, the day after perfect, that things start to fall apart, and that's because we have those highly emotional impacts, which, are anger or fear or anxiety, and those trigger a learned behavior, a learned response of how to cope with it, which we've learned throughout our lives, starting very young. And if our learned behavior was to, say, eat a bag of chips when we were angry, then we carry that into adulthood. And our brain says, chips have helped in the past, they're going to help now, so let's just go ahead and do that. But you have to have, good sleep, good hydration, so that you can stop that automatic action of just eating chips and cookies, whatever your food of choice is. You can stop that, and you can take that pause and say, wait a second, this doesn't actually serve my health and wellness. This doesn't reach my health goal, whatever that may be. Maybe it looks to lose weight. Maybe you're wanting to run a marathon or something, right? We have these goals for ourselves, and our emotions, they're not trying to default us. They're not trying to zap our motivation for these things. They are just automatic drivers themselves. So getting yourself into that kind of space to be prepared to handle those emotions is super important.
Now, that's deep. Preparing yourself for those emotions, I guess, you know, I try to meditate as often as I can, and it seems to really calm me. You know, again, I realized after looking at your book and looking through it, and you know, that I am that emotional eater. You know, and so I've realized that I have conditioned myself many times to eat. You know, to get a second plate. I don't understand that. You know, sometimes after I'm finished eating, I say, why did I do that?
Yeah.
You know, and I you know, after thinking about your book and stuff, I've really cut down on second servings because I realize that it's a habit more than a need. And so many times when we eat, we don't eat out of hunger. We eat out of that emotion.
Yeah.
You know, I understand that on an Egyptian tomb, there's a saying that says, we live on 25% of the food we eat, and the doctors live on the rest.
Oh, that's good.
And isn't that, I mean, that's ancient.
Yeah.
And so, you know, our eating habits are in direct relation to our longevity. You know, and so it's really important because, you know, we could develop high blood pressure, we could get, you know, hypoglycemia. You know, you turned out that you had hypoglycemia when you were a young lady.
Yeah.
And we can effectively take control of that by controlling our diet, but it goes further than that, because if our emotions are not addressed, then we're just really painting the pig, in essence.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to point out with what you're saying there. I love that you mentioned meditation. So as I talked about, for helping me, mindfulness was it. And I think a lot of times people say, okay, mindfulness, that's just meditation and I can't do it. I can't, you know, zero out my brain. But mindfulness really, the word itself is just about paying attention.
Yes.
Being aware. We move through our life so much on autopilot. And part of that is just because of how closely we've scheduled our lives down to a T. You know, wake up, do this, do that, go to work, do the kids. I mean, I know my own life is often scheduled in about 15-minute increments. And before, I didn't know how to handle that. Now, I do, and a lot of that is because I slowed down and I became aware. And I was able to realize what was important to me, what wasn't important to me, and how my choices impact my overall well-being and my overall life. But I had to do that through meditation. I had to calm this external chatter. I think it's 40,000 pieces of input, data, is hitting our brain at all times. And we only need a portion of that to survive. But that's really what our brain is trying to decide, is out of all this stuff that's hitting us, you know, billboards and radio and podcasts and social media and our job and the family, out of all those pieces, what is critical to survive? And part of that autopilot is just as simple as, I'll use this example. If we're driving down the road, our brain has to really focus on that safety. You know, that we're not running a red light, we're stopping at a stop sign, we're not going to hit somebody, right? That means that our emotional brain, it is in charge of all those other thoughts that aren't important right now. So if you're driving and that emotional brain says, man, we had a really rough day at work today. You know what makes it better when we're sad? French fries. And it tells that brain that's driving, there's a drive-through right there. Go get some French fries, because that'll make us feel better today. And we steer the car over there, we get the French fries, and we eat them, and then that's when the thinking brain, after we're home and we're calm, the thinking brain goes, wait, what? I thought we were dieting today. I thought we weren't eating French fries. Where did these French fries show up?
Oh my goodness.
It's because that emotional brain is the driver for a lot of what we're doing. And meditation allows us to tap into that emotional brain and not necessarily control it, but calm it and be clued in to when it's trying to jump into the driver's seat. And we can say, no, not really. That's not a thought that's important to me right now. That's not an emotion that's important to me right now. Right now, I need to take care of my health. I need to breathe. I need to focus on the driving at hand, right? And so I love the meditation piece that you brought up there. part of what I talk about in my book too is around neurotransmitters, right? So we have what we call the happiness chemicals. Okay, there's the primary four, which is dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. And those are released into the brain when we find things that feel good to us and a reward that's to us. And this is a biological drive. So if you can think way back to when, you know, food was scarce, we didn't have it on every single corner, we didn't have meal delivery people coming to our house, you had to actually hunt and gather your food. There were very long periods where food wasn't even available. So our bodies learned that we could survive the best on sugar, because that gave us energy to keep going and keep hunting, and then fat, because that survived the winter. Biologically, we still want those foods. That's still safe to our brain. We still survive. But our brain hasn't quite learned that there's food on every corner. So when we do get these emotions that we're just kind of like, oh, I'm feeling really just hard on today, or today it was just really angry, and we don't have another way to cope with it. Anger is something that's danger to our body. So it doesn't want danger, it wants to survive. And the very basic need for survival is fat and sugar. So there's sugar easily available in the form of fruit or cookies or ice cream, but we don't go for the fruit. We go for the cookies, we go for
Snickers.
the ice cream, the Snickers, right? And that piece mostly stems back to that learned behavior, where the learned behavior says, well, this is what you ate when you were 7 years old, right? You found the Snickers, because when you were 7, you're not going to grab an apple. Most kids aren't. My kids do. But, you know, when you're 7, you're going to go in the cabinets and you're going to grab your, you know, Halloween candy or whatever it is. And so you have trained your brain that candy is what solves this problem. And then that releases dopamine, and it releases serotonin, and you feel really good, and you feel really happy. But what's unfortunate is that those types of sugar, they burn really quickly.
Yes.
And then you don't feel so happy. But you want to feel happy. So you go grab some more candy.
And so
you
it's
go
a
grab some more
perpetual.
sugar, right?
Yes.
And it releases that dopamine again, and then you feel really happy.
Oh my goodness.
Right? So bringing that mindfulness, bringing that self-awareness of what this cycle is doing to you, you can cut that off. You can say, you know what, I don't need another Snickers bar. It's just a dopamine fix that I'm looking for. But you know what, the great thing about dopamine is our reward neurotransmitter. It is triggered anytime we get that feeling of, I got it, I did something. So you can have a dopamine release off of anything that makes you feel good about yourself. You know, if you love playing music, if you love drawing, if you like shopping, any number of things that makes you feel like, yeah, I did this, you can have that same dopamine hit. It doesn't have to come from food. We've just learned that that's the easiest. I think one other thing that you mentioned was about celebrations, that you even eat when you're happy.
Yes.
And that is completely normal. Food is a mainstay of everything in our lives. All the way back to our first birthday, what do we celebrate with? A birthday cake. Right? And the birthday cake isn't bad. It's just when we eat the cake every single day that over time starts to add up to health problems. Right? And I hear this all the time with my clients where they say, you know, I used to eat no problem pizzas and cookies and everything when I was in my teenage years and when I was 20 or 22. And I think, yes, you did. Our metabolism was much higher. We were probably far more active than we are now as adults, where most jobs are sitting behind a desk. And so we're just simply not burning as much as we used to as kids. So yes, you used to do all kinds of things as you were young without it really having much of effect, but that's not entirely true. It did have effect, just silently, you know, behind the scenes, and it's over the years that it finally broke. I was talking with another health practitioner friend of mine, and I used this analogy with her, which I just loved. In the news about, I think 3 years ago, at Arches National Park, one of the main arches had collapsed.
Oh, man.
And we think about just, oh my gosh, so suddenly, right? It just, and all of a sudden there's no arch there. But if you think about what that actually took, that arch has been standing forever, But then rain and erosion breaks it down, breaks it down, breaks it down over a long period of time in this case, and then it just collapses.
Mm-hmm.
And we can think of that same analogy for our body.
Wow.
Right? Like, we didn't just wake up one day and suddenly we didn't feel good. Right? We've had time of whatever we've been feeding ourselves.
Yes.
However how we've been moving or not moving our bodies, that has made an impact in little bitty tiny erosion chunks throughout our lifetime, and then one day the arch collapsed.
Yes.
For me, I was fainting.
Uh-huh.
Right? So remembering, bringing that awareness again to yourself that this wasn't instantaneous, this just kind of kept going over time.
Mm-hmm.
But it can change. And that's the amazing thing about our body and our brains, is that everything that's going on, we can change.
Absolutely.
Which is awesome.
Absolutely. I love that about it because, taking control starts with that change. Well, before we go on, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm Paul Lane. You're watching the Weekend Boost on KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. We're talking to Amber Stevens, author of Food, Feelings, and Freedom, The End to Emotional Eating, and just such really cool stuff. So meditation and mindfulness is really an important part of eating. I don't know how this relates, but I just keep thinking about chewing your food 26 times. And I've been doing that. I've been trying to get in the habit of doing that. And I got to tell you, what I have discovered was that I get filled up faster. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting because I had heard about this and I read about it and I said, okay, I'll try it. It's like, okay, 26, 29. And I did it, and it's like, it was so amazing. Mm-hmm. A couple of things happened and I want to share with you. One, I noticed that I got full faster. But two, I noticed that I was able to put those emotional feelings on the back burner. And I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I've really openly saw that, I've seen that this is really exactly what I'm experiencing. Mm-hmm. And so it was really an eye-opener for me to kind of separate that emotion from the physical act of chewing my food.
Right. So I love that you had that experience. And a couple of things happening here. It really takes about 20 minutes for our body to register that we've had enough food. So if you are a fast eater, you can eat a lot of food in 20 minutes before your body signals that it's had enough. If you're a slow eater, you'll eat less food. Still going to take that 20 minutes, and your body still will signal that it's had enough food. If it hasn't had enough food after 20 minutes, then you'll still have this drive to eat more. It's
yes.
pretty simple there. So again, with our society just being, super scheduled, most people, they either don't get a lunch break, or they get about 10 minutes, or they eat in their car. And these are all not mindful eating techniques. Mm-hmm. But whether or not you're in the car or elsewhere, just slowing down, simply chewing your food, counting how many times you chew. It might be impossible to do 26 times with yogurt, let's say. But with a steak, you can probably get about 70 times, right?
Yes, yes.
So chewing that food does exactly what you said. It just puts a pause on your life and slows it down and allows everything to just come into a little bit quieter, calmer focus for you, calming those emotions there. And then giving that time for your body to say, yeah, I'm full. I
yes.
don't need any more food right now. And in that slow, calm space as you're chewing, then your body is able to tune in to that fullness cue. Mm-hmm. We have a situation where a lot of us don't even know what our hunger and fullness cues look like. We only know we're full because our pants don't fit anymore.
Yes.
Or because, at Thanksgiving, the classic unbutton it and sit back in the chair kind of thing. But really, it doesn't take near as much food as most people think to get full. We just eat so fast that we don't even recognize that moment to stop eating.
Wow.
So if you chew more, you're simply slowing down that time and giving you time to process the food there. Mm-hmm. And I also love the chewing more for two other things. We have actually different digestive enzymes in our saliva than we do our stomach. And if you can chew more, you will get out more nutrients from your food. You'll break down your food in a much better way, which eases the digestion on your stomach. How many of us complain about heartburn, stomach reflex?
Yes.
All these problems, their stomach stuff, and part of it's just simply that we take 2 bites and swallow. Now all the digestive responsibility is on our stomach and through our intestines as well. If we can get most of it up here in our mouth where it's actually supposed to take place, it eases the burden on everything else below.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The other thing I've noticed that in doing that is that Anyone who knows me on Facebook knows that I love food and I love to cook. My girlfriend is an excellent cook, and I consider myself an excellent cook too. And what I have noticed is the more I chew that food, the more that food explodes, and you get so many flavors that you almost missed out on because you swallowed the food before you really were able to grasp it.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is a little off topic, but I just thought it was really relevant, you know. And
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm a foodie too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my husband and I, that is pretty much our favorite thing, is to figure out different meals, different foods. Like, I absolutely love food. And what you're describing there is, savoring, and that is a
Savoring.
mindful eating technique where you savor the food, you really taste it
Yes.
and experience it. That's all mindfulness is experiencing your life.
Yes.
And so you're absolutely right. If you've got some kind of complex food, giving yourself time to really chew allows all those little flavors to come back and hit all those taste buds and really wonderful things. Food is a sensual act.
It absolutely is.
You know?
Absolutely.
But we don't really take time to let it be sensual. Allow yourself that time. Really enjoy that moment that you're in with your meal. This isn't the hunter-gatherer time anymore.
Absolutely. So there's a range of emotions, and and the title of your book is End to Emotional Eating. So what emotions do we most need to be guarded against, or which emotions, or are there any emotions that are really particularly harmful to our eating, or cause us to eat more, or is it like someone's going through a divorce, or someone's has a loved one who is ill? That's going to bring up a whole wide range of emotions, and is it depression that's more of a killer, or more of an effect, or is it more? I don't know. I'm just just curious about that.
Yeah, I would say, to answer that, the most important thing, and the way I work with my clients, is to recognize that emotions are never bad. What is important is embracing those emotions, whatever they are. Don't shove them down into your gut. Don't push them away. Don't hide them away. Allow yourself to just sit with them. They're there. Your emotions are you. It's part of what makes your personality, who you are. And they need to be processed. Because if you think of the word emotion, really all it is energy in motion. Okay? So we have energy moving through us in the form of sadness or anger, and it's in motion, but if we shove it down and ignore it, where does it go? And that's when it shows up in intestinal problems. And I'm also a massage therapist, so it shows up in the body. Those places where I'm rubbing knots out on people, especially in their shoulders, your issues are in your tissues.
Wow.
It's right there. We pushed it down, and it has to go somewhere. So the biggest thing is just to embrace those emotions and learn how to be with them. Learn how to be with yourself. None of them are particularly dangerous, I would say, until they get to a point where you cannot sit with them. If you think of your emotions as, a little friend on a park bench with you, and you can't get to the point where you can turn and have a conversation with that little buddy on your park bench, then there's a bad relationship with that emotion. And I probably see that more often on kind of veering on that dangerous side with depression, because depression can also be hormonally and chemically induced in the brain. And sometimes depression needs support beyond just simple food and beyond just simple movement. But all of those things help. They just can get a little bit deeper and need a little bit more therapist support or even other medicinal support. So depression is a big one, and then anger is also the other one that I see a lot.
Anger.
Because we don't have a great way to express anger in a safe way in our society, really. And I've only noticed this in the last few years. I think I have 2 young boys, and I'm raising these boys, and they're very boy, and we have them in a martial arts class, so that helps them move some of that energy out, and they learn safe ways to wrestle and fight. But not everybody has that. And so anger tends to really get shoved inside. It's not okay to yell in an office environment. It's not ideal to yell at your family. right? But we get angry for sure. And so I see a lot of emotional eating around anger, and what happens when anger gets shoved inside is that it then starts to turn into anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then anxiety gets balled up. I like to use the image of the tight rubber band ball.
Yes.
You know, where you pull one rubber band off, but there's still all those rubber bands. That's what anxiety does. And so anger just goes in with that anxiety ball, and it, you know, gets wrapped around fear, and it gets wrapped around all these other emotions that we're feeling, and then maybe it starts small one day. But if we keep it held inside, that, you know, rubber band ball just keeps growing as we add more rubber bands to it.
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be an outlet for anger, especially, and I think for depression too, to have those resources to go to support that before it turns into a more dangerous health situation.
Wow. So if we find ourselves in an emotional situation where we're eating because of anger or because of sadness or because of anxiety or whatever that emotion may be, it's important for us to take a step back and consider this and maybe look at, well, look at me, you know, woe is me, I'm stopping at Taco Bell again, you know, and you know, it's I think a lot of it has to do with habit. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm talking about Taco Bell. I mean, I have really broken the habit of turning into fast food mm-hmm. restaurants. You know, part of this coronavirus has affected me very deeply, and again, it's off topic, but for me, what I've made the decision to do is I'm not going to go to large chains anymore. Mm-hmm. First of all, the food is very, very unhealthy. You know, there's a lot of preservatives, there's a lot of chemicals, there's a lot of hormones or whatever else is in it, who knows. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I go to a mom and pop restaurant or a mom and pop store, of course they may have a little bit more fat that they cook in it, but I really feel like it's a little bit more wholesome food. And the soda pop. I know that's a very tied into emotional eating, and I'm classifying that as eating because that sugar is there, you know. Mm-hmm. And I know earlier, you know, some years back that the industry discovered that the high fructose corn syrup is 40% cheaper to make than sugar, mm-hmm. and so they make it so available to us that we take it, you know, and we hand it to me, give it to me by the gallon, and mm-hmm. and so you know, I wanted to point that out, you know, because I know so many people who drink 3 and 4 and 5 Pepsis a day or soda pops a day.
Well, I have to laugh. That was me. That was part of my story. Before I was diagnosed hypoglycemic, I was drinking sugar after school every day. Yes. You know, the bus stopped at a Quickie Mart, kind of like a 7-Eleven, and I went in, I got my soda pop, and I usually got an ice cream or a candy bar. That's what I had on my walk home, pretty much every single day. And then I was having blood sugar crashes, which weren't great, but when I got that diagnosis, I was 14. It still took me 10 years to figure out how to care for my body and how to not faint, because I had to find out a lot of this information out on my own in nutrition and caring for myself. But one thing that jumped out at me when I did, in my late high school and early college years, I managed a movie theater. Soda was free for me.
Oh boy.
And I had to work late since I was the manager, and I had to close out the late shows. So I just kept filling up my cup. Well, when I started realizing the impact of soda in my life, I started doing the math, and I realized that I was drinking roughly 60 ounces of soda every night I worked.
Oh my goodness.
Which was at least 4 nights a week.
And how many ounces of sugar is that?
Yeah, way more than you need on that.
Oh my goodness.
So if you think 60 ounces, maybe that it doesn't seem that high to you, but if you figure that was 5 cans of soda. I was almost drinking a 6-pack of soda a night.
Wow.
Now, I drink a couple drinks, and I'm going, whoa, this is way too much sugar. I can taste it. It doesn't even taste good to me. So going from a 6-pack to, I can pass.
Yes.
And it's about once a year, honestly, when I go to a movie theater, that I think, you know what, I think I want a soda today. Yes. And because I know how to treat my body and I know how to eat mindfully, I'm okay with that. It's a soda once a year. Mm-hmm. But I'm always disappointed every time that I get it, because what I've imagined emotionally, what I've attached to soda in the terms of fun and feel good, does not come out in the taste. Mm-hmm. And so I've also learned now that actually when I say that I want a soda, I don't really want a soda. Mm-hmm. I might want something sugary, but it's not really soda that I want. And part of the thing that I changed on drinking soda in there is about fructose. You talked about kind of the worries there. Fructose is actually processed in the liver. So it doesn't affect our blood sugar as much as you think. And what it also doesn't do is trigger the we're full hormone in our body.
Mm-hmm.
So you can drink a lot of soda and your body and brain never says we're full.
Oh.
You'll start to feel it because that's a lot of liquid,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And you'll start to recognize that you're going to the bathroom a lot. But it's not going to tell you yourself that, oh, you know, that 20-ounce soda was plenty. We're
Yes.
full now.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't have that benefit for you. So you got to be really careful about sugary drinks. They just kind of go right into your body. And if you are moving your body, I don't want to come on here and say that sugar is the enemy. It's not. Sugar has a place in our life and a real need in our body, especially glucose. But it wants to be burned.
Mm-hmm.
Glucose is an energy calorie. It wants to be used. So if you're going to do something sugary for your food or for your drink, make sure it's a time when you're moving, when you're active, and you know that you're not going to be sitting in a car to commute, sitting at your desk for work, sitting at home for dinner, sitting on the couch after dinner.
Mm-hmm.
That's not burning the glucose that you put into your body.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, try to make those better choices where you take glucose in the form of fruit. Fruit comes with all these amazing vitamins and minerals and fiber, and the fiber does signal to you that you're full. So you can eat one apple and be completely content and get just the right amount of sugar your body needs versus a glass of apple juice, which that juice that you easily sucked down and it felt good at the time is probably equivalent of about 4 apples.
Wow.
So we can eat one apple and feel great, or we can drink 4 apples, but that's more sugar than our body needs.
Yes.
So be really careful about those sugary drinks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good. So losing weight has to do with diet and exercise, but it doesn't stop there.
No.
And I love that you have encompassed this, because all my life I have known or heard about emotional eating. I mean, we all have heard the term, but we don't really address it, or we don't really look at it in terms of, oh my gosh, this is me. This affects me. When you were a young girl, you were overweight, and your mother never really harassed you or gave you any hard time about it. And then you suddenly just lost weight unexpected or unexplained.
Yeah.
And so you've kind of gone through the whole gamut. I was the kind of kid, I grew up with wearing husky jeans. And if you don't know what that is, that's chubby. But, so I've wrestled with weight. I've struggled with it my whole life, and I mean to this day. But, understanding that there's a third component, or there's another component that really needs addressing, makes it, I almost think that that's a more important element than the diet and exercise. Because, I mean, we inevitably are going to exercise, and we do have some control over what our diet is, but that emotional aspect of it just seems like it takes control, or I think it's like that devil sitting on your shoulder saying, have another bite,
Yeah.
Amber, if someone wanted to buy your book, where would they go?
It is available on my website, which is www.youareboundless.com, and that's youareboundless.com, and then /book. If you just go to the root of the website too, you'll find it on there. It's available as an ebook for quick download. You can carry it with you on any of your tablets that you want, or your phone, anything for quick reference. Or it's available as a print copy too. So you can have it there with you. You can highlight things, rip out pages, whatever you want to do to the book.
Yes.
And I designed it with the idea of busy people. So read it from front to back, start in the middle, go to just a chapter that interests you, whatever works for you.
Mm-hmm.
As a small business owner and a mom, I typically read books in about 1 chapter chunks before I fall asleep. And that's late at night. So I designed this book that way, to just say, hey, if you can read 3 pages, read 3 pages, and then
Yes.
get the sleep that you need as part of your foundational health.
Yes, I love that about your book. I mean, I just opened up to a random page, and it's like, for starters, it's learned behavior. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so true. Food becomes a reward. I've been in sales for many years. I'm not doing sales now, but I always, when I would make a big sale, I would always reward myself with a great big Dairy Queen large chocolate dip vanilla ice cream cone, and that was my reward. And I look back on it, and it was just a happy emotional eating,
Yeah.
And so I think that that is so relevant to what we're talking about today, because we will look for any excuse to get fat that we can.
Right.
I mean that's not our outcome, our desire, but it seems like that's what happens.
Well, my primary goal here too is that people learn to love food, right? Like I mentioned, I'm a foodie. I love
Yes.
food. I eat pretty much everything, and I don't have it with any guilt or shame. And that's the key there. If you are eating food, whether it's an apple or it's a cake, whatever it is, if you're feeling guilty or shameful about that activity of eating that food, then that relationship with food is unbalanced. It's broken.
Mhm.
And it's likely driven from some emotion that's making that choice for you. You're not making it. That emotion is making it for you.
Yes.
So I don't want, that's part of my mission out there in the world, is that food is just food, and I want people to love it. You know, I tell people I want you to eat and be happy.
Yes.
But our relationship tends to be broken, and when it's broken, we tend to go to diets. And diets are pretty much designed to fail. So don't turn to diets, turn to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Turn to what is going on in your body. Listen to what your body is saying, to what your emotions are telling you. Learn to embrace your emotions as okay. They're not this evil, ugly thing that has to be pushed away.
Mm-hmm.
Just, they're part of who we are. And that particular emotion has decided it's time to eat a whole pizza by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? That in itself is okay too. There's a great method in mindful eating that food is not good or bad. Food is sometimes or always. You want the healthy vegetables and fruits and whole grains and lean meats. Those are always foods.
Mm-hmm.
Eat them all the time. The sometimes foods, those are French fries, cake, ice cream. The things that aren't even bad, they're just foods you don't want to eat in excess, so they become sometimes foods. So if you look at your meal throughout the day and you realize that sometimes foods are now your always foods, you can change that.
Mm-hmm.
Switch those things up. You don't need a diet book to tell you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at what's sometimes and always.
We're all aware about portion size. I mean, it's not science. It's very simple. Hey, that's a big plate, you know? And so I think it's really great, great advice, because I think a lot of times just like when we're driving home, we're doing it unconsciously. When we're sitting at that table, we're not aware so many times. And gosh, I'm so grateful for having come across your book, because it really has made me more mindful of that. Yeah, it really has. It's been a useful information, because I am that emotional eater, and so I'm so glad that we talked about male and females having this concern or this challenge during food. Talk about when we are, we've gone through just the most devastating thing. I lost a brother in February of this year, and I found that I was really sitting at that table and gorging myself. The grief was just almost too much for me to bear. Yeah. And looking back on that, I've realized that I really let my grief get the best of me. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, there's like I said, there's a whole range of emotions, and there's so many things that affect us that it's not complicated. It's really not, like I said, it's not rocket science, but it takes some effort.
Right. There's a lovely saying, it's a Japanese saying called wabi-sabi. Have you heard this?
No.
Wabi-sabi means perfectly imperfect.
Ah.
And when you talked about, your grief and eating just in excess, it happens.
Yes.
You just went through a completely traumatic time. You were imperfect that day, and that's great, right? It's living that perfectly imperfect life and just making those choices each time. So, staying in that grief and eating that way for years isn't going to be healthy or beneficial to you. But allowing that moment of people bring food to funerals and services. So, yeah, eat it. Don't let it go to waste. But, allow yourself to feel what you feel, right? Mm-hmm. Allow those emotions to be real. And if food is what you need in that moment, great. Eat that food. Mm-hmm. Just don't let that become your standard way of getting through your day and getting through your life.
So there's some self-forgiveness that has to be involved in this.
Yes.
I am the kind of guy that I am my worst critic, and I beat myself up, and it's like, you know what, you don't have to chew me out. I'm doing a great job of it, And so we have to be forgiving of ourselves if we do have that day of that perfect imperfection, and that day of, man, I ate two, they got these specials at a lot of these fast food places. Arby's has 2 for $6, and it's like, okay, I'll take 2. And it's like, oh, why did I do that, But I think there are times when we have to be kind to ourselves.
We do. I was talking to someone recently who, before COVID hit, that normal schedule of her working and then picking up the kids and getting one kid to this sport and another kid to that sport, and then high-fiving her husband, and they switched the sports that they took the other kids to, and then they had, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and I mean, just hearing the conversation was making me exhausted, and I wasn't the one who had to deal through that. And she said, I didn't know what to do, so we went through drive-through, and we all got drive-through, and we were eating on the way to the fields,
yes.
and this is my life. This is what I do. And what complicated the matter was that she was feeling guilty about it. She was feeling like she should be at home cooking meals for her family, and they should be able to have sit-down meals together. And one thing to look at when you're in that place is be absolutely self-compassionate. Recognize that this was a really hectic day.
Yes.
And sometimes we make choices that just, that was what it was. We went through the drive-through that day. But there's wisdom in that feeling. There's wisdom in that emotion, where if her desire was to have a sit-down dinner with her family, then she needed to make some choices around what her family's schedule looked like. It had nothing to do with her going on a diet plan, right? And that actually would have complicated things probably, because she would have felt even more guilty for going through the drive-through and not sticking to her diet.
Right.
What it has to do with is the lifestyle plan and the way that there's no time. You got to build in some time for your self-care.
Yes.
And when that falls apart for a day, just be compassionate about it. Forgive yourself for that moment.
Yes.
Because piling on the guilt, guess what? It triggers that emotional brain that says when you're guilty, eat ice cream late at night when everyone's sleeping. And no one can watch you because no one's there to see you eat it, right? No one else will judge you. And that's the amazing thing about food. It doesn't judge us.
Yes.
So it's easy to turn to because it keeps all of our secrets.
It's a good friend.
It is, but it doesn't really keep our secrets.
It's truly merciless.
It shows up again later on.
Absolutely, absolutely. We briefly touched on the hormones: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. It's so interesting that you talked about those in your book. When I came across it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is such a great topic, because I had been doing some research and I actually had been taking a weight loss product that was DOSE. It was dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. And I got to say that I'm at about a 13-year low on weight today, as of this morning. And it had to do with that, that product that I was taking, but it also had to do with understanding my emotional eating. So I can really truly say that, and I love that there's, I'm just going to open up essential oils. Oh my gosh, I could talk for hours on this topic. Activities that can help. There's so many things that are useful in this book. Foods that can help. So many times when we go to the grocery store, that back to that habit, we go right to the fatty, potato chips, and we go towards all of the unhealthy things. And a lot of our activity is being ruled by our endorphins that are causing our emotional distress or up and downs. Or does that make sense? Or?
Oh, it does. Yeah, we just go to what we know, and again, we go to that fat and sugar.
Yes.
Because that triggers that survival instinct, and it also releases the dopamine that, hey, we're going to survive for another day. And it's also not partly, actually a big part, as more research comes out, we have a second voice telling us what to buy. We have a voice in our gut. So there is a gut-brain axis, and that voice is coming from bacteria. Okay, so we have a thriving microbiome in our gut, which actually roughly 90-95% of our serotonin, one of those happiness chemicals, is made in the gut.
Wow.
And it's made from that bacteria. And guess what? Bacteria is a living organism. So it's going to speak up when it wants to survive. And guess what? There's bacteria that thrive off of sugar. And there's bacteria that thrive off of fat. And if your diet has been largely sugary foods, or well, let's say carbs too, simple carbs that break down into sugar, it feeds that bacteria, and that bacteria multiplies and it grows, and its voice gets louder.
Absolutely.
So when you're in the grocery store and you're looking at the choice between should I get the cupcake or should I get the fruit, that bacteria screams, get the cupcake, because that is more of the sugar that makes it survive. The fiber in the fruit makes a different bacteria survive. And that bacteria, it hasn't multiplied because you haven't had a lot of vegetables in your diet. And so its little voice is down here all weak and meek, going, pick the apple, pick the apple, pick the apple. And the sugar's like, no, pick the cupcake.
That is so mean. I can so relate to that.
Yeah, so, don't be fooled. It's not just motivation and willpower. You have a second voice down here yelling up at your brain, and the brain's like, okay, cool, let's do that.
Yes.
Let's buy the cupcake, no problem. And then it's later, when everything kicks in, and you go, oh man, I didn't want the cupcake, right? So be aware too that what you feed yourself, just everything, feeds this bacteria, and the bacteria talks, and it talks through neurotransmitters and through hormones, and it'll signal to your body what it wants to survive too. It has just as strong survival instinct as you do. So the best way to do that is to eat high fiber foods, minimize the amount of sugar, get the sugar from healthy vegetables, complex carbohydrates, and also to eat protein. So dopamine, serotonin, other neurotransmitters, they require certain amino acids only present in protein. So make sure that protein is part of every single meal. If you can have a diet pretty much of protein, vegetables, fruit, drink a lot of water, maybe some nice green tea for some extra antioxidants, these emotions will really balance out and start to take care of themselves.
Yes.
And where that bacteria had multiplied and grown really strong and loud, it'll start to die off, and you're not going to hear its voice very much, which means you won't be craving sugar.
Absolutely. And so you've actually shut off that neurotransmitter in effect.
Well,
Man.
you haven't shut off the neurotransmitter, but you've shut off the constant feedback loop from the bacteria that's saying this one is better for you than the other.
Wow. Hydration.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I got to tell you that I have seen such an impact, such a change and improvement since I've been consciously affected, making the effort to drink more water. And I can say I feel better. There's this thing where you pick up your skin and it stretches down, and it's like, I'm hydrated, I'm always in the bathroom, but I'm hydrated. So hydration is really an important part of food. Does hydration affect our emotional eating, or does it?
It does.
Yes.
So when we're dehydrated, even as much as a 1 or 2% dehydration, it actually dampens our prefrontal cortex, that thinking brain. We don't make decisions as clearly, we don't handle our emotions as well, and we start to rely on those coping mechanisms to just soothe through food and what makes sense for us. And that's a very small amount of dehydration. And we tend to be very dehydrated as a society, but what's even a little more scary, I guess, is that our brain actually starts to shrink. So when we're dehydrated, we're actually losing gray matter in our brain, and that has repercussions throughout all of our health.
Oh my gosh.
Where we're just not functioning as well, and our immunity is lowered. I mean, that's super important right now for our immunity. And our lymphatic system, which is what flushes out all the toxins in our body, it absolutely needs water to do that.
It's critical.
And it needs movement.
Yes.
So if we think of our cardiovascular system that circulates all of our oxygen, it has a pump. That's our heart. And it pumps through the blood and the nutrients and the oxygen that we need. But our lymphatic system is what gets rid of all the icky stuff. Our lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. Moving our body is what moves the lymphatic system. So that's just another reason to get up and move, so you can flush out all that stuff, hydrate, so that your body and cells are enriched with it, and I mean, you just have so much good health benefits from just drinking water.
Huge. Oh yeah, you're not as hungry.
Yeah.
It's just really like so impactful. It's really been an amazing change for me, and so I have to say that I'm completely in support of that. What about supplements, food supplements? What's your thoughts on that in relation to diet or weight gain or weight losses?
So I have a love-hate relationship with supplements. I think supplements need to be exactly that, a supplement. They should not be the mainstay of your diet. And not long ago I did have a client who came in and her breakfast was coffee and about a bowl full of supplements. And we started working together. I think she was taking 27 supplements, and by the time we worked together, we got down to 2 primary supplements that she needed, and she felt amazing and energized, and her skin was glowing. I mean, she just felt fantastic by eating real food. So your primary focus should be eating all the fruits and vegetables that you can. Your body needs vitamins and minerals to make all of those neurotransmitters and those hormones function effectively. Your brain needs vitamin C amongst other trace minerals to convert into dopamine.
Yes.
If you don't have those, then you're not converting those happiness chemicals even if they're present in your body. So, and you need vitamin D. Vitamin D is huge. And so I'm actually on a vitamin D supplement, and that was a real eye-opener for me as somebody who eats a good range of foods and varieties, and I'm out in the sun all the time. That's my favorite thing, to be out hiking and be outdoors. I really expected my vitamin D levels to be optimal. But after a visit with my doctor and we did all of our labs and checking, I actually had a little bit low vitamin D. Not crazy low, but a little bit low. And that can lead to depression and fatigue. And again, we can't convert that dopamine into feeling happy.
Wow.
So I am on a vitamin D supplement, and that's kind of changed my feeling around certain supplements where I think, you know what, there can be a real strong place for them and a strong need for them. But I think it's really important to look at your diet first and shift your diet more towards vegetables and vitamins instead of going to just a whole bunch of supplements, because there can be negative sides to supplements too. And what supplements are lacking is that they don't have all the trace nutrients that whole foods have with them. Some brands are formulated a little bit better where they've started adding more of these trace nutrients as they recognize the importance of them, but it's still not the complete package. Nature's done a beautiful job of saying, hey, everything that I put in this tomato is everything that you need to function together within that tomato. You need the vitamin C and the vitamin K and the vitamin E.
Yes.
Like, you need all of this in this great little thing, and you don't have to take 27 supplements to get there.
Wow. Yes.
So I think supplements have a place. I would just be really conscientious about the reasons that you're choosing those supplements, and do you really need them?
Amber, we are out of time.
Okay, that went too fast.
This went so fast. There's so many things I still want to talk to you about. We've been talking to Amber Stevens, the author of Food, Feelings, and Freedom, End of Emotional Eating. Folks, get this book. I know that 90% of Americans need to understand their emotional eating habits and how to get control of them. This book is a very simple read. It's so easy to read and so easy to just open up to any page. How much do you need? Talking about vitamin D. There's just so many. Food for Feelings. Guys, this book, again, where can they get this book?
It is available through my website at www.youareboundless.com/book. That's YOUAREBOUNDLESS.com, and it's available as an ebook or as a hard copy.
So please make it a point to get this book. You've been watching The Weekend Boost on KUHS The Stream on 104th and Melody Drive. I am Paul Lane, the Weekend Boost host, and we thank you so much for joining us. I also want to take a minute to just special thanks to Henry Archuleta. You make this all possible. This city owes you a great debt. You've been a great contributor to much growth and leadership in this community, and I'm so grateful for you, Henry, and your friendship means the world to me. Amber, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I loved being here. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much.